Okay, thank you everybody for joining us for Covington Independent School Board meeting tonight. Becky, would you call roll, please?
Mr. Avery?
Here.
Ms. Lurledge?
Here.
Mr. Gastrite?
Here.
Mr. Haggard?
Here.
And Ms. Huff?
Here. Everyone would stand and pledge allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome everybody. If you would take just a moment and silence your cell phones, it would be really appreciated. And for the folks that are at home watching us, we want you to know that we will appreciate you tuning in to us tonight. Okay, do we have any public input? Okay. So we're going to move on down to the informational items. The first one is the Energy Savings Project Year 3 Annual Report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Huff. We got some guests joining us today, and they're going to deliver some pretty positive results to the board. So thank you guys for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. My name is Mike Lindsay. I'm the Performance Assurance Manager for Performance Services. So my team monitors all of the projects we complete. So we have about 1,300 buildings across the country that we keep the monthly utility data. So we're tracking your utility bills every month, making sure the buildings are performing what they should and so forth. And so in that process, I'm going to present your utility data for the third year post-project completion. I have to apologize because I sent Becky the wrong file. And so in your folders, it's probably not accurate. So she was gracious enough to work with me to get the right report and utility data, or right report and PowerPoint on the board. So I'll go through that and then she'll get that updated file to you. So it's updated from there. So I apologize for that. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. So I'll go ahead and get started. So just a reminder, the project scope of work, we converted the most supplied in the district to LED, which produces significant amount of savings. You have solar systems at Carlisle Elementary and the Chapman Ed Center there at the Holmes campus. We did some significant HVAC work at 9th District Elementary School, and then some target upgrades throughout the district, some visual controls of the HVAC system. So there was one major kind of project, and as far as the lighting, a major project at the one school, a couple solar fields, and some targeted things that kind of just make the buildings more efficient. The base year that we look at is 2015. That was the last full year before we put the proposal together and kind of analyzed the data. So this is information compared from 2015 versus basically school year, July 20 to June 21. Now, we had a lot of questions about the impact of COVID. And it's really, we've tried a million ways. There's really no way to know for sure the impact of the energy savings on that. There's for the most part, not a lot of energy savings. You'll see a lot of water and sewer savings because the buildings were used for stretches of time. But for the most part, you kept your building somewhat under control because you don't want an empty building to get out of control, maybe damage the system. And then once kids got back in the building, we actually added ventilation, which creates more energy use. So it's really hard to develop that. So that's one of the reasons, historically, as we look at system performance, we try to isolate the systems and calculate the savings of each of those improvements. And so that's why we call it measure and verify, because we look at the lighting, for example, and the reduction of kilowatt hours, run hours, and calculate how that saved, how much money that saved versus the utility data and the utility cost at that time. So there's a couple things we'll look at here is both the raw data and then also that calculated number. But in raw data, your energy use for that time period, so July 20 to June 21, was down almost 42% compared to 2015. Your natural gas was down just a little, and this is not weather adjusted. So we had a pretty severe winter, if you remember this past winter. And so the gas use was up because of weather. This is not adjusted for the weather. This is just looking at the actual raw data. Solar systems produced almost 480,000 kilowatt hours. That's about 79% of what we expected as far as what the system's designed to do. But again, that expectation is based on a normal sunny year or sunny month. And so we track I won't bore you with all the details, but there's a way to track kind of the cloudy and sun exposure. The sun exposure is about 78% of what you would expect on a normal year during this time period. So we're right there on what we expected the system to produce. It seems like we had 2 or 3 years now where the sun exposure has been less than what normal. So we're hoping there's sunny years here moving forward. But I can't control much of that, if any of that. This graph, and I'm sure this I don't think this is in what we sent you, so that's why I want to get some of these things updated for tonight. If you look at this graph, the yellow columns are the amount of kilowatt hours produced by the solar systems by month. That gray is the sun exposure or the cloudiness. And so there's a weather formula rating the cloudiness on a 0 to 10 scale. So that gives you an idea. It's a little more cloudier in the winter. It's not dramatic, but a little bit of cloud is like, you go on a sunny day where it's partly cloudy, you still get quite a bit of sun through. And then as the clouds build up, it all goes from some sun to nothing pretty quickly. That's kind of what we see on solar systems as well. You get that point to where that 6 or 7 or 8 rating, all of a sudden you go from good production to very little in the solar field. The blue line, or the blue columns there, see there, that's kind of along with the gray, is the amount of snow accumulation. You remember January, February, we had a lot of snow. And a typical snow event where you get 1 or 2 or 3 inches, you'll land on the solar panels and you get some sun within a few hours the next day. It melts off pretty quickly because you've got that heat. This year we had significant amounts of snow. So we've got pictures of different panels. I don't know if you have one of yours, but different parts of the Midwest where there's 8, 10, 12, 18 inches of snow on panels. That took a while to melt off. So we had some systems with almost no production through the month of February. Yours still had some production. You didn't get quite as much snow. But again, that tracks kind of snow accumulation. So you can see sunny, you get production, cloudy, snow, you get very little production. But that's how we track that. And we watch that on a monthly basis to make sure we're getting the production the system should be producing. The other thing I wanted to show you, this is just, I told you earlier, it's about 41.6%. It's exactly 41.6% down in terms of total electrical use. This is the month by month, the amount of electric you used. Base year 2015 versus 2020, 2021. So yeah, that's something we watch it for all the buildings, make sure you're seeing that reduction that you would expect. The other thing I wanted to share with you, and we started adding this to reports, I think a couple years ago, because in Kentucky particularly, you've seen some pretty significant rate increases on your electricity and utilities. That's kind of been across the country. You've seen it more specific here because you still have some of the cheapest or lowest cost electricity in America, but yours is going up quicker than some other states. That's because we're trying to move away from coal production, and you were almost 100% from coal production not long ago, and we kind of moved away from that. So it's more expensive to produce electricity, so that rate reflects that. So I started this in 2017 because that was right when we finished the project. You spent almost $823,000 on energy in that year. If you took the rate increases you've seen over that 4-year period, the blue line is what you would have paid had you not done anything with buildings. And so if everything would have stayed the same, just upon rate increases, you would have spent almost $1,150,000 in this past school year. And your actual expenditure was $562,000. So without the project, everything being the same, applying rate increases, you would have spent almost $600,000 more than what you spent last year. So that's kind of different than what we calculate on how we look at the savings. But it just gives you an idea of the total impact of the project versus not doing a project. And I know we see this all over the country and all over the Midwest, but really if you can see this in Kentucky with our customers, there's a lot of sacrifice going on to pay those increased utility bills. And you got away from some of that by doing the project you did at that time. Any questions on that piece? It's kind of a new diagram. It's something kind of thrown at you here the first time. We just started doing this because we saw that rate increase all the time eating into the savings you expected. People would say, well, really, we didn't spend as much less as what we're looking at. Well, it kind of offset or hits that rate increase. So.
Well, this just relates to our electric use, is that, or total
This
energy?
is your total energy cost here.
Okay.
All right.
The biggest impact on that rate increase has been the electricity. I'll just go, this is the last page I have, or last slide I have for tonight. And we've talked before at your presentations, but if you don't know, the EPA has an Energy Star program where you can get your schools ready for Energy Star. It's similar to having criteria for you can get electronics and appliances that are Energy Star rated if you go to the criteria. You have 4 schools that could qualify for Energy Star certification. First things first, there's no money or grant or award that comes with that. The picture you see, they used to send a really nice bronze plaque, and now they send stickers for the door. So the government's kind of that's work, but it's still a really good way to show that we're maintaining a great learning environment, and I'll get to that here in a minute, as well as being energy efficient. And so to be Energy Star certified, you have to be in the top 25th percentile nationally. So you have to have a 75 or higher score out of 0 to 100 range. And that means you're better than however many percent of the buildings below you that are in the system applying for this process. And to do that, you have to beat the energy requirement, and then you have to confirm that you're maintaining proper temperature, humidity, CO2, light levels in your classrooms. And so we've kind of been on the verge of certifying some of your buildings, and you, like a number of other school districts, decided last year, probably not the best time for us to send our team in to measure those things. And so we've compiled over 100 buildings we've got coming back while we're waiting to certify. When the time is right, that we get back in there. We have to take those readings when the building's occupied to prove to the EPA that we're doing this environment for students and learning. And that's a good thing. And I was getting that as far as getting the certification, it's for a way for you to show taxpayers we're being great stewards of dollars and we're providing a great learning environment for students, which has always been critical, but it's more so critical now than it's ever been. So that's the last piece I wanted to go through. We talked earlier and decided maybe let's revisit in the spring if we want to go take those readings or not, just because having a bunch of our folks in the classrooms may not be the best, most prudent thing right now. And we understand that completely. And the other thing is, we've talked about additional opportunities through projects like this. A lot of school districts are taking ESSER dollars that are designed for your air quality, so you can use those for projects of this nature. And so we've been talking about scope, and hopefully we'll be back here at some point to talk to you about additional work you can do to grow these numbers and grow that savings, including some other solar opportunities. So that's all I have for this evening. Any questions or anything else, information we can provide?
I'm going to go around the tables for questions. If there's
Yeah,
any.
please.
I'm going to start with Mr. Avery. Do you have anything? Ms. Sarah?
To be an Energy Star candidate, you're saying that you have to go into the buildings to do that. How long would you have to be in the building to gather the information you need?
So what our process works, we put sensors in their classrooms. We have to place those when students are in there. And our system will allow up to 10 of those sensors at a time. They have to do readings, we go back in and get them, download our computers and set them. So we're in the room, 5-10 minutes in each room. We have to get a count of the number of students in there as part of the process, measure temperature, humidity, and then that sensor. And then we do the light levels then in the evening after the kids leave typically, because that takes a little more time. We can just leave the lights on and do that after students are there. It's a little bit in each room, but it takes time throughout the building to get the whole building done.
In each room?
It takes about 5-10 minutes in each room.
In each room, okay. That is a lot of time.
Yes.
I was just thinking if you just did it for 5 minutes, then maybe you
Yeah.
could move on with the project, but
Yes, we have to go in and set those
in every
sensors,
room.
then
That
come
does
back and
take
get
time.
them,
yes.
We do a statistical sampling, right? So we don't hit every room in the building.
You have to have a minimum 40% of the classrooms qualified, so we just do them all since we're there. Typically, we can do fewer, but still we've got to be in your classrooms. And
Sure. I understand.
Would it be possible if you went in like before the students got there and then came back at the end of the day?
We've tried that. We still have to be, part of the certification is that we've been in the room and know how many students are there. So we still have to get a count, and we have to certify that, and get an engineer to certify that. So we could try looking into that, but we still have to be in the room to know how many students are there during that reading.
All right, Mr. Gaspar, do you have any questions? And Mr. Haggard?
One question I had was, I know, have we recouped through savings our initial investment? I know there was an initial outlay to do I assume, obviously it was before my time.
Yes, so
But,
I can refer to that a little bit, or how you want to answer that, but how it was set up, there was a bond purchase. They'd actually have bond payments each year that are offset by those savings.
There's a 20-year term bond. So we guarantee that the savings is going to at least pay for the bond repayment as part of the project. I believe it's exceeded in each year so far of the project. So that's some net savings that goes to your general fund each year. And then there's a separate like restricted fund bond that also is separate from the energy savings general fund bond. And that probably knows more specifics on that. But so it's going to take the full 20 years of the annual savings to fully retire the bond. But yes, it's on track.
thank you.
And I believe you said that we spent $843,000 to get our projects done, right?
I don't know the exact number right now, I would have to go back and look, I'm not quite sure. Again, it's over a 20-year term.
Yeah.
And so, there is some escalation throughout the cost of payments towards this. But
Right.
like he said, we exceeded so far, basically, essentially, we had for the first 3 years, it's paid for itself, and we received some savings on it. Now, maybe year 19, it may not, I don't know, but right now, in the first 3 years, we exceeded savings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And so, yes, thank you guys again. I'm excited about the opportunity because I'll just remind the board that our buildings are quite old and, to take our buildings and transform them to a point where they're potential Energy Star buildings, that's pretty outstanding. And I just credit them. I credit our engineer, Ralph Cooper. I credit Mr. Kippenbrock and of course Eric Neff back when he was here. They did an outstanding job with this, and Ken Meston. So, great work, guys. We just continue. We enjoy the positive PR based on this, and we'll be getting a press release out, I think, sometime tomorrow. That's exactly right. So, we appreciate you guys' support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Safe travel back home.
Thank you. Good seeing you.
Okay, our next one is personnel action. If there's any questions, Mr. Kippenbrock is here. Anybody have any questions? That way he doesn't have to come to the podium if there isn't any. Okay. Fundraising request, Holmes High School Student Council, number 3.
That's basically just them requesting to work at the concession stand. I'm almost thinking, I don't know if they would, I don't know, we need to think about that because a lot of times, that's actually fun with them. Kids work at, books work at the concession stand normally. So I don't know if that, we bring it to you, I guess, just to be safe. I'm not quite sure that needs your approval, so we bring it to you.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on that one?
Can this go to the consent agenda for next meeting?
Well, why don't you, it can,
Okay.
but
We did.
my concern, because kids have done it when I was band, whatever. We did it, parents did it as well, but we put some of the kids in there as well. I'm just worried about safety and COVID. So talk about that, and if you guys are still in agreement that it should be okay, put it in the consent agenda.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay, great. You're up. Mr. Bryan. Hello, Mr. Bryan.
Good afternoon. We're doing our Gear Up grant. It was a 8-year grant when we initially got it in 2018. And it services, we renew each year, so we come back each year. Right now, they are having a Gear Up advisor for our 8th grade, our 9th grade, and our 12th grade. And they'll move up a year each year of the grant. They provide in-class seminars with the students about college and what the advantages are. They'll do field trips. They'll take the students to, when we can take field trips, to the local universities. But it's a federal grant that goes to the state, and then the state asks certain districts based on pre-introduced lunch, which districts would qualify. So I think there's a total of 10 or 12 districts that are part of this year, this grant site.
So we need to re-up, right?
Yes.
Okay. So could this be on this is number 1. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Yes, Mr. Carter?
So, Mr. Grant, I know we got the contract and the MOU in here. Do we have any kind of data reports? I know we've been partnering here for a long time, but just to know that it's working.
I can check with Randall, Mr. Hampton, and I'll see how he's taking care of. In normal years, I think there is a little more data that they have, but the last couple of years, and them not being able to do the things that you normally do. So I'll have to just reach out.
I think most of their work has been virtual since the pandemic. I do know that the vision of Gear Up is to create, especially in low-income, high-poverty school districts, to create that college going culture. So they try to help the school and the school district create a college going culture so the kids have access to the universities and colleges. That's the mission of Gear Up. So, yeah, I think that was on a normal year, I know they have data, but I just don't know.
I'll follow up.
And do you know how long, I know this is year 4 of this current cohort.
One more year.
Okay, but like before this current grant, how long has our relationship with Gear Up? When did it first start?
We've been partnered with them, when I was principal, so it was around 2000. So each time they've had a new cycle, coming from home, we've been part of it.
Thank you.
Mr. Bassett, do you have any questions?
None.
Hang on.
Mr. Avery? Thank you, Mr. Brown. Early Head Start contract update. Ms. Thompson, and it's nice to see you again.
So good evening. Ms. Terry and I are here to present as an informational item. The Early Head Start contract is a little different this year. We've had a partnership with Head Start for several years, and it's been a great partnership. They've offered Ms. Kim's team valuable professional learning opportunities, opportunities for our families and students at childcare. And each year they present the contract to us. Well, this year when the contract was presented to us, had some new things in it that we had a discussion about and brought to Mr. Garrison and also Annette. They were asking us to put all of our Early Head Start students in one classroom. And I'll let Ms. Kim kind of explain, sorry about that, go into that a little bit more. But that was a concern for us as far as what the program we provide at the child care, and that was the concern. So we did bring it to Annette because obviously we do get a per student allotment, which affects the budget that Ms. Kim turned in to Annette. So we wanted to, after conversation, we wanted to bring it to the board to share with you all, since you know about the contract and our partnership, the reason why we are suggesting that we not go through it this year. So now Ms. Kim tell you the better details.
So usually when, in the past, we've had the children basically in their same age group, the infants with the infants, toddlers with the toddlers, and so forth and so on. This year, they requested that we have all of the children birth up to age 3 in one classroom. We do have 1, 2.5-year-old, and most of the other children are younger infants and toddlers. The infants and toddlers, not so much of an issue, but when you have the older children, you know, even in their contract, they said that the environment should be developmentally appropriate for the children enrolled in the program. And in our thought, that's just not developmentally appropriate for our children who are 3 years old, almost 3 years old, being in the room with infants, when the teachers in the classroom are going to basically be doing a lot of routine care for those younger children. It's going to be harder to focus on the 1 or 2 older children that are in the classroom. Another one of my concerns also is that's putting all of our basically low-income children in one classroom, which to me, I feel like that's segregating them together instead of integrating them into the program like we should be, and like I feel like our program is, because we have such a large number of clientele in our classrooms. So that's my thought on that.
Okay. Question? Or you got more?
No, what I was gonna say, we currently only have 3 children enrolled in Early Head Start as well. So we have 1 classroom, and they do require 2 teachers in a classroom at all times. So you're talking 2 teachers for a handful of children, as opposed to if we were to have regular classrooms as well, we could put more children in the classroom as well as, you know, integrate them appropriately.
Do they know that you're considering not re-upping the contract?
Yes.
And how have they responded?
They have asked if we would like to look at other centers that are doing it. But I honestly, with everything going on in COVID world, I haven't had time to visit another center. But that was their suggestion, is that we go and look at another classroom to see how they handle everything at another center.
Mr. Patrick, do you have any questions?
Kind of a similar question to Mrs. Huff. I just didn't know if we raised these concerns to Head Start and said, can we change this contract? Are we able to change it to more what we want to do?
So we did ask, those were questions, we did ask those. They actually shared that that requirement was part of the original grant, but they just were not including it yet into the contract. Ms. Kim also reached out to the parents that this would involve about their children being in that next stage, and got their feedback. And their opinion was that they prefer them to be with their peers, which was another huge reason why we're here. And we did ask Ms. Kristen to please come back to us next year if there was a change, that please keep us in the loop just in case that part of the contract changed. But
Does this, I guess, Director Birch, does this affect us financially or impact us financially in a big way, or?
It's about $18,000 that we'll have to take from the general fund to support the daycare. So to me, it's minor compared to the things we just talked about. So, right, $18,000.
Because we would have to hire 2 additional teachers.
No, the $18,000, they need the teachers to then deal with our ratios. It's about, we're not gonna get that funding from Head Start. That revenue wasn't coming in. And so it is, I think she said 3 kids, right, Kim? 3 kids is about $18,000.
So we would, if we continue with the contract, we would lose one child because her mother actually said no, she would not. She's actually the older child. She would not. She would prefer to have her child in a class of her own peers. And then we have another child on the waiting list, so it would equal out. We lose one, we gain one.
Do you have any other questions? Mr. Castro?
Yeah, I just wish I knew how other places were dealing with it. Because it seems like they're doing this everywhere. I mean, it starts a big program, and I can't imagine everyone else is right with it. But I agree with you, it doesn't seem to make sense.
And we're 5-star, right?
Biggs is 5-star. We're currently 4-star, but we will be going up for our next star's evaluation in the spring. Because of COVID, we.
Right. Sure.
one of the things too, Ms. Kim has asked the team there is to get the contract to us earlier so that we could bring these decisions. Obviously, Ms. Kim's made a budget with the next timeline, and unfortunately, the timing of how they get their information and it kind of comes down to us is the reason why we're not late to the game, but a little bit behind. So we apologize for that. But I know Ms. Kim has reached out several times, and it's just timing of things. So,
Ms. Sarah, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. Like, after reading through it, it makes sense why this is, something that you don't want to go down. Just wish they would give us some more options, because it doesn't make sense.
Mr. Avery? Okay, thank you. So is it okay if we put this on the consent agenda for next time?
Is that okay? Do you need our approval,
Or do you need it?
Pastor? Or do you
I do not believe we need
need
your
the approval?
approval. We just wanted
Yeah,
some information to let you know.
Okay.
Because, yes.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
School administrator manager position for Covington and All High School.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm actually asking the board to eliminate this position that is currently vacant due to retirement and create at the same time a position that we already had, but that is currently vacant due to a transfer. So I sort of explained that in the rationale that is before you. So we are serving less students right now under the home hospital program. We anticipate that reduction to continue indefinitely as the state has embraced more virtual options. So that is why that position has not been filled to this point, but it has created more of a need to help serve students both in person and virtually, which is something that the adult high school does. And it also is lacking an administrator, so this takes both of those into account. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Hager, do you have anything?
And I don't know, with the Senate Bill 1 language about classified staff, is that permanent or is that just related to
That
this
is not permanent.
school year?
That's just during the,
State of
code, yeah, the state of emergency.
But you're saying we're gonna eliminate this home hospital teacher position altogether, is that what you said?
Yes, sir.
And is this school administrative manager position in addition to principal and assistant principal? Or that's the adult high school, that's.
Correct. There's-
I'm getting all confused now.
We only have 2 staff at the adult high school right now, 2 teachers and a 0.5 part-time admin assistant. It's the lowest staff we have ever tried to operate that with. We have left a couple of other openings unfilled to try to return money to the general fund over the years. So this would be a third person in that, and the only administrator.
Mr. Baxter?
No questions.
Ms. Sarah?
I don't have questions.
Mr. Esri?
No question.
Is it okay? Do you need a vote on this?
Yes.
So is it
That's
okay if we put it on the consent agenda for next time? Yes. That night, so go ahead. Thank you. Okay, number 7. Yes, sir, and 1 and extra 2.
The first spreadsheet that you have is ESER 1. You've seen this before. This is the first pot of money that we got from the federal government due to COVID. And so we just updated it to show the actuals. Most of it stayed the same. There's only some minor tweaks to it. So if you think about it, we're trying to use ESER pot 1 first before we go to ESER 2 that we started to just start spending. And of course, ESER 3, we have not started spending yet. And so this just gives you a snapshot of what our allocation was, 2.2, almost 2.3. The private schools about 125. Our allocation was at 2.15. And so it shows you the detailed breakdown, because a lot of times munis reports aren't that very user friendly. So the spreadsheet kind of helps you in layman terms see what we used our ESER 1 money for. So if you have any questions, I can answer those before we go on to ESER 2.
Mr. Hager? Mr. Abstract?
None.
I'm getting you, no, go ahead.
And we did send, I just want to remind the board, we did send you the results from our ESER 1 audit. And you have that in case you wanted to review that. So I just want to put that, just remind you of that. Thank you, man.
Yes, everybody's any questions in here?
Yeah.
Okay. So ESER 2 is a new spreadsheet that you've not seen yet. There's 2 spreadsheets because there's 2 pots of money that we have to put in the GMAP. Just to remind you, GMAP is the budget that we have to submit to the state. So 55-4G is 1 pot, 55-4GB is the second pot. The second pot is, first pot, so far we've spent 512. Second pot, we have spent almost 1.2. And I ran these numbers as a 9.9. And so we promise you as a board, we will come back and give you this information. So I put this together to show you what schools or department is spending the money, what their description is, and what is the dollar amount. These are actuals. So there could be some things on a financial report that shows a PO and a company. I'm not going to bring you that because I always tell people $100 PO never comes in at $100 in the bill. So that's how we will present this information to you, is actual, what has been spent out. We are going to be bringing this back to you every couple months, probably quarterly. And so I just wanted to get that to you first, the first couple of months of the school year first. And so 9/9, I get it, to try to get it on for the board agenda. And then so we will give them that quarter.
Any questions for her?
Director Bridgie, is it possible on these SRQ spreadsheets just to get a percentage of total spent at the end? Like of this 511,854 that was spent.
Sure, I can do it.
Is that just like what percentage of the total of this?
Yeah, that's not hard to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, do you need a vote or is this just informational?
This is just information that will bring it to you.
Okay. Well, it seems to me that this is well thought out. We appreciate the transparency. And I think it's the transparency and to let everybody that is our stakeholders and everyone know exactly what we're doing and what we're thinking. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's what the board requested.
Yes.
We kept it throughout, so we set a goal, we can have information every couple of months or quarterly, something like that. And I think that's great timeline, to give you a quarterly report.
Well, it's good that you listen to us.
I try hard.
And what I will do is I will just be adding to it. So you'll see the same data on it and you'll just continue to get it to that percentage of what you're spending with the formula Mr. Hager wants. It is keep one of them. I'm going to give you just a snapshot. I'm just going to give you everything as we're going. So if you saw something in one quarter and didn't need any information, then on something triggered that, hey, you want information, now you're just going to see it all again.
I am curious about one thing. How do you keep with everything else that you're doing and the team is doing, meeting the timelines that has to be done? How, I mean, I would be pulling my hair out. How would you do that?
I say before all this ESSER money, because you talk about it, because when I get to my working budget, you'll see there's a lot more ESSER versus just ESSER 1, 2, and 3. I tell people all the time, you have to be very organized in this job because you wear different hats, you have different deadlines, you have to be really particular about deadlines. And that's the type of person I have been, always. That's why it fits me to be in finance. But it has been challenging when you put $32 million on the books.
I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Okay,
I was gonna say myself, sometimes she is pulling her hair out.
I bet.
And we feel the impact sometimes. It's all good.
We will listen to it. Okay, so now we're at our monthly financials and warrant expenditures.
Yeah, so this is your normal stuff that you get my little narrative saying a snapshot of how much revenue we have, there's how much expenses for each fund. You have our munis report, you have the balance sheet, you have our checking account showing how much money that's in all our bank accounts, along with the investment accounts, as well as in all the warrants that you guys ask questions about every time, and we'll get you the answers. So it's the normal packet. We're just moving along, just to keep in mind that when we do have an ending balance from the prior year, it helps us be able to make all our payrolls and pay all our bills, because we do not have tax money yet. Tax money doesn't start coming in until the end of October, November, December. So money could get tight. Lots of school districts do have money that is very tight. They can't make their payroll, they have to go get loans and things like that. But we have that ending balance that helps carry us over. My concern that I have reached out to grant coordinators is we have a lot of cash flow with these grants. I gotta pay for all these bills before I get any ESSER money. So I'm getting a little worried because I need to have cash flow to be able to pay my bills. And we have to be able to start requesting money for Title I, other grants, because we need that money. And because ESSER is a whole different challenge, being that's $30-some million. We're not spending 20 that, but still we're spending the first pot money too. So I have to be very mindful to keep watching to make sure we have enough money in our bank Now, mind you, remember, I have in Heritage that $5 million investment that we earn a little bit more money each month. And so if I need to, I can grab that, and it's very easy to do because it's the same bank account and things like that, but I have to watch it during this time frame to make sure that I can cover all of it.
This is not time. Are we still having a problem? I know we had this problem. We still have a problem with KDE being very late on reimbursements for grants. And
Yes.
hurting us with our cash flow.
Yes,
Just want to put KDE on blast again.
you're used to the exposure of 21st century. They are very, we don't turn our stuff in for 21st century until quarterly. All my other grants, Title I, IDFE, different ones are monthly. I get those timed, but it's after the month if you've already paid the bills. Quarterly hurts us, and we do have a lot of 21st century grants that's $500,000 that we're waiting quarterly. Sometimes it takes them up to 2 quarters to get us our money. So I nicely complain to the grant coordinators to reach out to the state coordinators to say, where's our money? We turned in what you needed. You need to review it and give us our money. We need our money to pay our bills and keep going. And so that creates another challenge too.
Is there any way that we can stop working with the 21st grant?
I don't think you would want to do that because you would ultimately hurt the kids because that's a great program. And then with our regular programming, Title I and things like that, we had to have the budget in GMAP by August 31st. They extended that because they were too busy dealing with COVID. It's usually due June something. They said you don't need to do it till August 31st. So we submitted that, we have that. They will not release the money. We have Title I teachers being paid out of Title I until KDE approves it. Well, if you didn't do the deadline to August 31st, your year started July 1st. You have expenses from July and August, and I get September. And so I nicely asked Mr. Guy and Mr. Thompson, can you get on the state? I need my money. I need the money. Say my money for the deal, you know, to be able to pay the bills. And they're busy, and hopefully they're looking at it because I think it triggered a response that we have some things we have to fix in that application because it's a huge application when you're putting Title I, IDB, Title III, all kinds of grants. But to me, that seems backwards. You know, you don't have to submit the plan, but then now you're holding me hostage, getting my money, and so I nicely push.
But sometime it might be the federal government's getting them those dollars a little late, so it's hard to, so, yeah, I would say.
We're just on
sometimes-
it, I'm mindful, and I push when I can nicely because you have to be okay.
Does anybody have any questions for her about the monthly financials and the warrant expenditure? If not, I need a motion.
I move to approve the monthly financials for August and the warrant expenditure report.
Second.
Becky, call roll please.
Ms. Burbidge? Yes. Mr. Gastroite?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Hager?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
Yes. Now we're going down to working budget.
Yes. We'll talk about the general fund first. You know, last time when I met with you guys, I gave you that Word document telling you what the changes were from May up until the board deadline for the first board meeting in September. And so now I had to make changes. I'm going to tell you, budgets change constantly. It's not a perfect world. Things happen just like the daycare we just talked about. The daycare is not in here because it's just transpired. So again, I'm always about trying to be transparent to you as a board, but things happen, things change. I got a whole bunch of rate changes from my payroll staff, where a teacher we thought was on a certain salary schedule rate, well, now they're a different rate, that's more money, so I gotta add it to the budget. That's not in this budget either. So I just wanna be transparent and honest, there things do happen. And when we usually have big ticket items that we do things, we bring the big ticket item to you as a board. And then if you approve that, then in essence, means you're approving the budget because we have to find money to put in the budget, whatever that XYZ item is. So my Word document, I updated it. You'll see certain things that say I did it on 9/21. So that was prior to what I talked about 2 weeks ago. So there is some things in there. One of the general funds, after I do year-end adjustments, auditors were in here last week and different things, that changes. And so we have $54,000 more to our beginning balance, so I fixed that to be able to make that budget as tight as it could be, because I put that to you to my budget. So I did that in September between my board. That's all really I did in general fund. I did a lot of grants. You know, I focus so much on general fund. It's the biggest budget, it's our operating budget. And I try to get to all the grants and work with the grant coordinators and set up budgets. So when you go to the Fund 2 section, you'll see a lot of stuff that I say I did in 921. And so I'll just bring up some of the highlights. Idea B, an Idea B preschool got ESSER money. And so Idea B is getting $255,000 and Idea B is getting $35,000 and something. So they had to submit stuff in GMAT and say how they were gonna spend the money, so the grant coordinators worked with that, they gave me that information, I'm working on putting it into Munis, so it's in Munis, we are waiting for the state to approve that. So you talk about ESSER, I just told you now, we almost had $304,000 in ESSER funds to be able to use for IUB and IUB preschool. So again, it was through that it's happening as we were already on the budget, so that's something I did link to the game too.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
We just received $300,000 on Idea B. You said ESSER. Wouldn't that naturally go toward the issue with the preschool? That $18,000, I know that's not much, but it sounds like that's what we can pay for that.
Idea B preschool is biddings, not daycare.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So those are extra grants, which is great. We love, we get more money, we do more things for our kids. That's great. ESSER 3 was never in the budget, but my head said we need to get it on the books. And so ESSER 3 is almost $20 million. It's 19.852. And so what I did is I took those buckets that we said we were going to do and assigned account codes to them and put them in Munis. It's just, they're a holding place. We have not touched it, we have not spent it, we have to come back to you as a board. But I wanted it on our books that it is the working budget for this year that we could potentially start spending in the next 5 years. I can't just, I'm going to just 5 million or 6 million, I want to put full allocation. So I'm going to do that. So that was a big ticket item. FRC gears, that was the governor's money that if FRCs, I know Janice and her team brought and said we want to apply for this. We got 5 schools, $500,000. That's ESSER money too. So when you're talking about that, we are constantly getting more ESSER that get put on the books. So I worked with those budgets. Some of them were locked in. Some of them were rough drafts that they're working on fixing and figuring out how they want to spend their money. Some things are coming in at a higher cost than they thought, so they're going to have to go back to the state and get a new budget. But I put the budget in until they turned in just to get it on the books. That's another $500,000 I was working on.
Now, are we getting money from the governor for the extra nurses?
No.
We're not aware of it.
No, not at this time now. Title 2A allocation, I had to tweak it and get it entered in, and so that's entered on there. That's a normal Title 2A. 21st century budgets. They were still being finalized when I had to submit this for this board. And so again, I just dumped in the allocation. There's like 5 schools that are 21st century that got funding, and then the 2 other schools that we did, we said we're going to use ESSER Pop 2, but because it's for the after-school program to help with funding. And so I didn't know the budget, so I just put a budget together, put it in there, and it just came in this week, so now it's actually fixed. So when I talk about this stuff in the working budget, it eventually will show up on a financial report. You will start seeing expenses happening. It's just right now, I was putting in this 40 place. It's just try to get to the grand total of what our budgets really are. Let's see. I had to move some money with Mike and Field because Mike was a little higher. The BG one came back to you, so it's 300 and some thousand, now it's 400. So all these things affect that working budget. So again, my end goal was to always be transparent with you as a board what's going on with our finances. Nutrition services, we usually work on the budget. Ms. Tanner and Ms. Stewart and I decided this year because there were so many unknowns in regards to, she had like 10 openings, as well as I know on the board agenda, we're going to be talking about raises with food service. For me to just make up a budget, we're still in the trenches of it. We just rolled over the budget. We usually don't do that in under those circumstances. We chose to do that, Ms. Stewart and I talked about that. So that's on my little document saying that I kind of tweaked it and so we just rolled it over. So with all these grants that we have, I felt that if I just gave you a financial munis report, you really couldn't see much because it rolls up all the grants. So I did that nice spreadsheet that's in the packet with the working budget that lists every grant that we have. And so our grants come up to $38.1 million. And so that spreadsheet, I thought that was more detailed to provide to you, so you as a board can see, okay, district vote, we get $180,000. Math is on the top, 96.8. ESS, we get 541. FRC, our regular FRC is 540. And you just keep on going down, down, down. And I just thought that would be good financial information to give to you.
What is the total one?
38.1.
Ours says
32.5.
30, I think my formula is wrong. It is 32.5, sorry.
Okay, sorry. I just want to make sure.
You got the right copy out, and I have my wrong copy. 32.5, thank you. It's a lot. Because if you look at the spreadsheet at the top, grants from last year were only 8.5. So we went from fiscal year 21, 8.5 up to 32.5. There's a lot more coming through this district financially. So I like this idea of giving it to you just because I know Munis rolls it up. I wanted you to be able to see that. So that's a new document that I've never done before, but I wanted to share it with you. Now I know Becky got you out a packet just a few days ago because on the original one, ESER 2 wasn't coming over into Munis properly, so I was able to get that fixed. And so I wanted to get that information out to you today, before tonight so that you could see that.
Please explain, because I think the board would want to understand that ESER 1 is not on this sheet, and that would have made it that much more if ESER 1 was
Yes.
considered. But ESER 1 was last year, so this is just this current year. So
Yes, when you create a working budget, it's the year you start the budget, you put it in the working budget. You don't usually roll it over into different years. With ESER 2, we only spent for like $500,000-$600,000 for food to help the food service fund. And so I didn't want to just leave it in last year because the most of the volume's been hit this year. So that's why I kind of let part of it hit in 21 on the working budget and part of it in 22. And normally it's the first year you have a budget, you put it in there and you put it in every year. But yes, that would have been in there.
that's the question I asked, so I'll
Yes.
clarify that.
Yes, yes. And so, yes, I had to figure out why it was only pulling, ESER 2 was only pulling over some of the money. And so I was able to figure it out in units, and it took me until like just a few days before, and that's why you got that packet at home just a few days ago to say. But just keep in mind, I think I put a note down there that, okay, we spent $400 and some thousand, how can it show up at ESER 2 this year? So again, I like that idea. I probably will do this from now on every year. I have stars next to the ones that we normally don't get grants for every year. And it's mostly again because of COVID, those grants. So I just think that's more information to help you guys see everything. So those are most of the changes I feel like I did between 2 weeks ago and now. If you have any questions, I will answer them, but I do need an approval because by law, we have to approve it by the end of the month so I can submit it to Katie. Mr. Packard, do you have a question?
Well, I just say thank you for the grant breakdown. That's awesome. Just to be able to, I think we all know just in general how much money and grants we bring in. It's nice to see that breakdown come where it's all going. So thank you for that extra work. One question I did have, so I know obviously you're able to put in the additional revenue that we'll get from the increased property tax amounts in this working budget. Or do we have a specific item or items that we can explain to the public that we're going to use that additional revenue for?
Right now, that 4% increase went in last time because it was on the sheet earlier. So what we're doing is that's in contingency, part of our contingency. And so anything isolated in contingency, if you know, we all talk about we're going to take an indirect on ESER 2 and 3. So any of this indirect cost, I would like to be able to put towards contingency because we were saying that we need to deal with the salary schedule and raises and things. And so that's where it's going. It's going to keep building up that contingency to be able to help us put some money aside to deal with that when we start looking at it.
So we'll go into the 10% contingency for this year's budget,
It will
not into
salary increases for this current year's budget.
Until a decision's made. If you guys then as a board, we bring you something and you say, yes, I want to do it, then I'll switch it and put it to where it's appropriate. But right now, since we haven't said yes to raises in any category, it will go in contingency.
So
And it
if
will
we
increase
approve,
that contingency more and more at 10%.
so if we approve the nutrition salary increase tonight, would it come out of that 4%?
Keep in mind, nutrition service is a separate fund, and so that's why one of the reasons why we started with that. So, but in any other case, if we bring something to you in October or November, yes, that would be a true statement.
Okay. Mr. Haggard, do you have anything else? Mr. Evans?
Good, thank you.
I have no questions. Would I need a vote, please?
I move to approve the working budget fiscal year 22.
A second?
Thank you. Ms. Horn, please.
Ms. Lurlich? Yes. Mr. Gastroit?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
No.
And Ms. Huff?
Yes. Capital funds.
This was an information item before with the working budget, so now I'm bringing it back for approval. This was one of the ticket items that helped us balance the budget, just to keep, to refresh your memory, capital funds, there's certain things we're allowed to use our building fund money, Fund 320. And so we have the lease payments and 2 buses on there for a total of 480, 869. I think when I presented it back 2 weeks ago, I thought it was roughly 450, so I did tweak it to have the right amount, so it's in the budget in the right amount for this stuff that you're approving tonight. But this is a separate item that we have to have a separate approval so that I can submit it to the state so that they can process it, so that I can get the building fund money. Yeah.
So we're gonna buy 2 buses
Yes.
because of the rotation.
And I believe last year we didn't buy buses, and so, yes.
Any questions? May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the capital fund request for fiscal year 22.
I second?
Okay, Becky, please.
Ms. Lurlich? Yes. Mr. Gastroit?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
Yes.
My last one, I think. If you remember last board meeting, I brought one of the there's 2 projects I brought to the board that we had to revise the BG one. And one of the reasons was when I went to close out one of the projects, the funding, we had extra money that they made me go back, hey, Katie, you said you had to revise your BG one first to show it on as a budget, because the BG one is your budget, before you can do this BG5. And all I'm trying to do on this BG5 is free up the money to be able to put it on a future construction project, which we have several of those sitting ready to be used. So when we bring something to you as a board, we can use all that extra money in all those BGs. But it has to be a BG5 before I can put it on a new BG1. And so this stems at why I had you to approve the BG1 and asked for the approval right away, because I knew I had to do the BG5. Once KDE approved it, they actually turned it around fairly quickly. And I was able to bring it back to you to say, can you do this BG5? Why it's an approval is because really you approved it back in June because we thought it was right back in June. I felt that since you've already seen it, I'm just fixing all the paperwork that KDE was asking me to do, that I can put it on as approval and not do information to approve. This BG5 will help us get our $66,000 to put it towards new construction projects. There's a lot of paperwork, you know, get our money back to do something with it.
So I got an idea. You just wait.
So I do need an approval on this so that I can submit it to be able to put it in that holding spot to wait for the new budget.
Any questions for her on this issue? Okay, I need a motion, please.
I move to approve the revised BG5 for BG19 202.
I second.
Who's second?
I second.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Lurlich?
Call roll.
Ms. Lurlich? Yes. Mr. Gastroit?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
Thank you.
Take a breath. Okay, the consent agenda. Does anybody need anything removed or discussed? None? May I have a motion to approve then?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Becky?
Ms. Lurlich?
Yes.
Mr. Gaskrike?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
Yes. We went all the way down to 24, which is the 2021-2022 emergency paid sick leave. Mr. Kittendorf.
We've been operating under the emergency regulations that came out of Frankfurt for some time now. This plan is extremely similar. The largest change is that it allows if an employee is actually COVID positive to get up to 80 hours, 10 days, up to 10 days of emergency paid sick leave for the regulation. Something Mary Ann and I actually talked about very early, never made sense to us, and I think a lot of others, because it seems to disincentivize folks to get tested. But so this would correct that if the board were to pass this and allow us to grant leave to vaccinated employees, regardless of whether they're COVID positive or just quarantined due to COVID-like symptoms. Also addresses the ability of certain positions allow for work from home for employees to be able to do that, as long as the supervisor turns in a bona fide, or the request for bona fide duties involved should be doing working and completing at home. Also covers if they're caring for a quarantined family member when they're not subject to quarantine themselves. There's a form associated with it, a little bit of a procedure associated with it in there. I'd be happy to entertain any questions on the policy and leave we're proposing.
Mr. Avery, do you have anything? Sarah? No. Mr. Haggard?
Just a couple of questions that I think I tried to ask last week, but they just didn't get answered. The 2/3 of their daily rate for employees who are caring for an individual, is there a reason why it's 2/3, not just full? I didn't know there's a
It is.
regulation.
Because the employee himself is not quarantined, so the employee could actually use a sick day if they wanted full pay. That language was actually taken from the federal language that came the first time this happened. I actually copied it stuff with it. We discussed it at cabinet, thought that since the employee himself was not quarantined, it was for a family member, that was more appropriate because they could be coming to work except for that need to care for the family.
And then, and this would apply just to vaccinated employees.
Correct.
The leave portion of it.
The work from home until December 1st, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's for the home, instead it applies to vaccinated. Now, the reality is a federal mandate, so for announced by the president, the reality is that for the most part, this, I don't think you're gonna see as much of an impact as we initially thought, because, you know, Kentucky is within an OSHA jurisdiction, OSHA state, so assuming that stands up, you're gonna have the vast majority of your employees are gonna be required to be vaccinated. So I think that's less than we initially thought, because initially when these regulations were coming out, authorizing, the laws were being written authorizing the sick leave. That was one of the questions, and that we were debating is the disparity between vaccinated and unvaccinated. But I don't think that I see as much. You're still going to have some exceptions to vaccinated, but it's going to be
I don't, I appreciate you all taking the time to put the policy together. I assume all Mary Ann's points, I think it was great when we first wanted to do it. It's another way to encourage folks to get vaccinated. I mean, I am a little concerned about the 2/3 of the daily rate for those caring, just they're trying to look out for single parents who don't have anyone else to take care of their children or, you know, that's kind of, that's a sticking point for me, but thank you for doing this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, a couple questions, because I saw on the revised COVID plan,
that we are moving toward a test and stay if we can work out the logistics. So in that case, if someone is choosing to quarantine, why wouldn't they come in and do the test and stay to see if they actually have COVID? Like they just say, hey, I've got symptoms.
We are doing that with employees right now, so test to stay is for students.
No, it's for all.
Oh, okay.
It includes teachers or administrators, it includes everybody. Yes. Am I correct with that, Dr. J?
Jen Foley is still looking into that. The health department has issued guidance that it is for students.
So, but we are doing a different version of test to stay, just not through that provider. So if an employee right now is,
I'm almost sure it's for everybody.
okay,
I'm almost sure.
okay. And we are doing it already before that test to stay goes through. So the process goes right now that if an employee is quarantined and they're vaccinated, and we would then, I yielded Ms. Foley on the timeline here. It's usually, I've noticed, around 48 hours. The employee can go get a test right now, and as long as they're negative, she or her nurse lifts the quarantine, and the employee does come back prior to that full quarantine period. So regardless of what happens with that, whether they do it at school, through the test there, whether they do it on their own site like they're doing now, that is happening.
And that's in our language. Is that in this language here? I thought?
I'm not,
I don't think so.
I'm not sure that it's, in the language, it is in the sense that their quarantine then ends, right? So they return to work. So this is just addressing on those days that they are quarantined and they cannot come to work, that they're eligible for the EPSL. But as soon as the nurse ends the quarantine, they're eligible to come back to work.
So I guess my question, if someone's positive and they're not quarantined, they're isolated, right?
If they're positive, and they're home,
Yeah, just right. So the question is, if someone is positive, they're technically isolating at that point, not quarantined.
correct.
Right. So I guess what I'm wondering is, if we're paying for them to self-quarantine, but we also have a program where they can test to stay, are we sending mixed messages? Or is this policy just following the law? And
Following the law, this is one of the things that we kind of talked about, and I talked about with one of our colleagues, I'm concerned about that. That I think personally, that if I were an employee, I would want to do the test to stay. Knowing that COVID isn't something that's just going away. And that I'm probably going to need those days later in the school. I think we just have to recognize that it's a virus that's not just around for a couple months and then it goes away. That's my personal thought, is that I think that's the operating basis.
so does this policy provide an additional 2 weeks of time?
So it's up to 10 EPSL days for the year, the way this policy is written. Should it go beyond that, the way this is right now, they would have to use sick days beyond that.
So they have a certain number of sick days, and this grants 10 additional sick days, potentially,
Correct.
if they decide to self-quarantine for symptoms that could be COVID.
Right.
But we want to encourage them to test to stay in that case. So you wake up, you're like, itchy throat, what do I have? We want to encourage our staff to test to stay. If they're positive, then they're isolating, and hopefully they can use these days.
Correct, that's what I know.
But they don't have the option to self-quarantine. There is no option to self-quarantine.
If you're positive,
No, you have to, your quarantine is determined by somebody
by
telling
either
you.
your medical provider or nurse.
Right, yes, you can't just say, I've got the sniffles, I'm self-quarantined.
Right, but if you're in a close contact with someone
Right,
who is positive, they tell you to quarantine.
they tell you, somebody has,
Someone tells
The
you,
healthcare provider.
and that should be an opportunity to test to stay.
right,
I guess my point, I'm just saying that there's a difference between, people could say, well, I was a close contact, right? So I'm quarantined right now, and I'm just wondering, we're telling them, well, then you can take one of these 10 sick days. But we also have a program where they can come into work and if they're negative work then. So I
We
think
can add an addendum to this policy.
The policy says that they must be tested.
Right, that's what I thought, I
Yeah.
told you, I thought, really, yeah.
B, subset 3, after seeking medical diagnosis. If they think they have symptoms, they must be tested.
Yes, yes, and that has been what we've been doing, right? So the first page, letter B corrects, or subset 3
Yes.
must be tested.
but not necessarily by us.
Well, they go, what I usually tell a lot of people are like, looking for advice, one of our biggest providers, we're lucky right here at Gordon Johnson, the old IRS line, as long as you get there before 1 p.m., you get a test result that same day, so a lot of our employees are
Mine
running.
was the next day.
Really, well, they're supposed to be the same day. And for, in large part, we are seeing, it's very late, usually around midnight or something, or maybe 1 a.m. But within 24 hours, let's just say, and then a lot of our employees are in fact, by and large, what our employees are doing does seem to be trying to get back, going and getting a test, either there or wherever they choose, and trying to get back as soon as they can. The overwhelming number of folks are cooperating on that.
Okay, so I guess, I just feel like we probably need a clearer way to express our recommendation to our staff than the policy. And I think that our recommendation should be to get them tested with results back as quickly as possible. And if they're negative, then lift the quarantine in the back of work, right? This policy for people who are just, I don't know, not sure if they're positive yet, right? Like if you get one of those tests that takes 3 days, is that person quarantining for 3 days? Or do we tell them, hey, we have a test to stay program that can get you same day, or, I know the test to stay has a PCR test on day 1, but you can do the instant tests for other cases. So I guess as we get comfortable with our process for test to stay, I guess I just want
We
to
could look to update.
make
this.
sure that this policy is good, but we might need a better communication to our staff on like the best way to test this day, so that they're not waiting for several days at home using these sick days.
And when we finish up, exploring the test to say, we definitely need to update this.
Okay.
To include something.
Yes.
Mr. Everett, do you have a question?
No.
Ms. Sarah?
I don't have any today.
I do. You do? I do? Okay, I'm with Mr. Everett on, number one, we believe in equity. And whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, and I know it's the law now, but it just seems wrong to penalize people for their personal choice. But with that being said, yes, I believe everybody should be vaccinated, but people just don't want to, and they're not going to. But I don't think they should lose their job for it. The second, I'm concerned about the 2/3 pay. If the board decides to make it full pay instead, can we do that, number one?
I don't see why you couldn't.
Yeah, you can always do more. You have to do less, if you can do more.
Okay, so if a single parent, they gotta take care of their baby, yes, they don't want to send it to a childcare provider and get them affected if that child's sick with COVID. So I would like to have a discussion among us about whether or not we should move it to full pay, or if we should leave it the way that they're proposing.
Now, granted, there could be some funding implications, budgeting implications, and I need to make sure you all understand that. The question will be, will it be retroactive or will it just be going forward? So I think you need to think about those things, because retroactive, we've had quite a few employees past that have been quarantined, so you really need to strongly consider that. But that's about all I have. Yes, the board could make full pay for everybody. Again, we just borrowed the language from what we did before.
Correct.
And
Which was
it
based off
seemed
the
to
federal
work.
one.
It seemed to work. I want to put that out. But the board can do it.
Was this proposal that you brought us, were you recommending it to be retroactive? Because I didn't see any language about that.
Well,
So the way it's written right now would be for the entire 2021-22 school year. So it was in fact going to be retroactive if you passed it. I was going to go back with folks who use sick days and credit with the next folks.
vaccinated people.
Vaccinated.
Vaccinated.
Correct. Yes, as written. And credit those folks as written. And I would just remind you that what folks have been doing to care for a child is just using their sick days right now.
Right.
So
That's
far,
what
no
I was
one's
saying.
taken them.
Currently, if we were not in COVID, they would have their choice to care for a family member who's sick. They would either use some sick days or they would use FMLA, which is unpaid. And so the two-thirds is actually, what this is doing is giving them, paying them where normally they would not be contracted. It's sort of that FML, COVID, thank you, for want of better term.
They
So,
were out of sick days, right?
yes, if we were not in the COVID world, that pay would either be, you use up your sick days, it gets unpaid, or it's,
I mean, to what I said earlier, and to piggyback on what Mrs. Huff said, I would be in support of making it full pay for those taking care of individuals. Just because COVID has already robbed everyone so much, and this is just one small thing we can do to boost somewhat the morale of employees, so they don't have to burn through. I know those sick days are very valuable to teachers, especially when we're just in normal circumstances with all the sniffles that go around, so I would be in favor of full pay for it.
Mr. Kickenbrough, I guess the question I would ask, try to help guide the board's thinking. Okay, what documentation does an employee have to use to say that they have a child sick? Because I think that would play a role in this.
So documentation on the form says the source of quarantine or isolation order, but I took that to be for you if you were quarantined or isolated. Written documentation by a healthcare provider who advised you to self-quarantine, or a copy of the doctor's order, child care provider certification of unavailability from school, or child care provider that child care is unavailable due to COVID-19. So
some kind of medical documentation.
yeah, it would have to, I would think it would be the same documentation that maybe we need to discuss before. It would be the same documentation that an individual employee would have to provide if that individual employee did. So either a quarantine or isolation order or something from the healthcare.
When you get, like when you go get tested, you get a notification that you got tested. You know, you might not get the results for 24 hours, but at least that would be notification for you that I'm serious, that my child or family member has possibly COVID and is being tested. Would that be given as documentation hypothetically?
we could take that.
Okay. So we know, the board knows how Mr. Haggard and I feel about that, about changing the 2/3 to full pay. Mr. Gessler, how do you feel?
I guess I'd want to know what the financial impact of that is. So, you know, maybe not that much, and I'd be fine with it, but I think that knowledge, I'd want to know that this is 10 days. This is a third of 10 days per employee.
I don't know how you could come up with a budget dollar because I don't know who's gonna be using it. Everybody makes different amount of money. So my 2/3 to full time for me is different than it is for anybody in this room or AT. So I don't know how you can tie a dollar amount to it. I can't even tie a dollar 2/3 to it to say the financial hit for it. All I can do is tell you when somebody is sick, when we pay them, general fund pays for it.
Yeah.
In normal times before COVID.
And this is 10 days for either or, right? This isn't, I got 10 days because I'm quarantined, and then I got another 10 days because I'm caring for a caretaker. We're saying there are 10 days. Okay.
Correct.
I want to clarify that.
So basically, what you're saying is take those 10 days, just make you pay for it.
Yes.
Also.
That's what I'm saying.
And the proof is the same either way.
Yeah.
You either have to show that there's a positive test for you or a positive test for your child.
Or a test being done. We may not get the results back, but it would give him the opportunity to.
Is this just for vaccinated or is this for everybody?
This is for your vaccinated, that's what your
Yeah,
policy
right.
is.
It's written for vaccinated,
Okay.
That's,
All
if it's written that way, because that year is with the stats.
Right, okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood what we were doing.
Okay, Sarah.
I know what it feels like to take leave of absence and only getting paid 2/3 of my money. And I am 100% in favor of having full pay. It's really hard to live off of that when you're trying to also care for somebody. So I definitely would be in favor of full pay. I also had a question about, I know that we can't, it's not that we can't, but we try not to use the ESSER funds for, personnel, paying their wages. But is this something that maybe we could use part of the ESSER funds to kind of make those ends meet?
I think you could probably.
Absolutely. But I think, we hadn't developed that ESSER 3.
Of course.
So I think we're getting to a point where we're gonna start tapping into ESSER 3 because we've allocated ESSER 1 and 2. So am I correct with that, Director Burton?
Yes.
So anything you all approve and you direct us from ESSER, I need you to understand that we're starting to go to ESSER 3. But yes, this would be a very appropriate expenditure with ESSER. But we're starting to get into ESSER 3. So I just want to put that out there. If we could go this route, we would be more than likely possibly getting ESSER 3. I can't say we are, but.
I don't particularly care where it comes from. It's taking care of our people.
Right.
Of course, it was just an idea,
Yeah.
if we were worried about if it was coming out of like our regular general funds.
Right.
It was just a thought, that's all.
I think it's a great
Nope,
idea.
that's it,
I
that's
think
it.
it's a
Okay,
great
Mr.
idea.
Avery, do you have anything?
How broad is this individual? Does this have to be a family member, does it have to be a child, could it be a neighbor?
Would want to use the same definitions that you use for FMLA, for care for a family member.
I think that individual is too broad.
Specific definition.
I can see a family member or your child, but individual don't, it's too broad.
In another caveat, as I'm sitting here, is I would want to, so the reason we have this provision is, so schools have a statute on how many sick days a school district can bring to employees. We can't go beyond that because it's defined in the statute. This emergency paid sick leave came out of Senate Bill 1, I believe, and then the regulations from PPE, expanding it for expanding sick leave, not altering the statute, but saying we're going to expand it because of COVID and because we're in a state of emergency. So what I want to do when I go back to my office is just check, because this language is straight out of the regulation. and double check, can we actually go beyond it? Because remember, as a school district, we are, we can't, as a school district, outside of things that say, you know what, we want to do 20 days paid sick leave. We just can't do that because we have a statute that tells us you can give up to 10 days back. Or whatever that amount is. You can give that amount, that's it. So I would like to double check that, to see if we can go beyond the language of the regulation.
Well, let's
I
do
think
this.
we probably can, but, this is just uncharted territory.
You check, you know by consensus what we want. And if you find out that we can make it full day, just put it in a consent agenda for our next board meeting. Is everybody okay with that? Are you okay with that, Mr. Kimmeroff?
Sure.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Superintendent?
Absolutely. I guess my question would be, so while we're waiting till that next board meeting, what would the board like us to do with this?
I would think that you would follow what you're doing now.
Okay.
And
Is that, I mean, do you
The
feel
only
good
concern
about
is
that?
right now, COVID positive folks have not been eligible. If they would have passed this tonight, COVID positive folks.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't they pass it as written tonight? And then if I find that they can increase that, we could come back and amend that, or you could make it
Sure.
retroactive.
can we say that?
Yes.
Okay, well then I'll need a motion.
Okay. I move to approve the 2021-2022 emergency paid sick leave as is.
I second.
Kathy?
Ms. Harlage? Yes. Mr. Yashtright?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
And so my clarity, we'll just come back and update once we find out if we can
We're allowed to move it to full.
move it to full pay. For vaccinated, that's
For
what I want
back,
to
all
keep.
this is for back.
Now we are in the nutrition services. Salary schedule proposal.
So, there is a recommendation to adopt a new salary schedule for our employees in nutrition services. As you may know, we've looked at neighboring districts, we've looked at others working in the food service industry and what their current pay is. We've had a very difficult time attracting and retaining. So as we try to keep up with open positions, there's a good one that's keeping me up at night, worrying about whether we're going to be able to serve our kids lunch. So I'm asking the board to change the salary schedule for this year, moving forward, not going back right to the correct, moving forward. So I want to make sure I'm wording that
Yes,
correctly.
yes, moving forward.
Moving forward. So,
But it's not for just this year only. It's
no, it's for,
moving-
yes,
right.
it's just
Clarify
moving
that.
forward, but not retroactive to the year, but moving forward from now. I'm asking the board to amend the salary schedule for the nutrition services folks.
You want to explain to the public where this money is coming from?
So nutrition services operates out of their own separate fund that is not impacted by the general fund. In a normal school year, they are completely sufficient, or if anything runs a surplus in that fund. We anticipate after COVID that would return to their normal operating budget and procedure.
Okay, we're gonna start questions, Mr. Haggard.
Sorry, just a clarifying question. You say going forward, does that mean, if I'm a food service assistant right now, at 10 years experience, making 1424, we adopt the salary schedule, I'm not going to be moved to 1630 this
No,
year?
we would, right, but not since July 1.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
It's already within the next day. Yes, sir.
And I just want to be mindful to tell you that we did meet with each board member individually to discuss this. So there was a lot of discussion, and I feel like the public should know that we did meet with each one of you, and you brought your feedback and things to us. to then get us to this, there's been more of a discussion as well. I just want to make sure that.
Absolutely.
And the dollar amount, just to remind you from the meeting, was, I think this was a whole year, it was like $142,000. So it'd be a little less, and we're saying we get it for this night effective, we, 23rd, so it's 2 months into the fiscal year.
That could be effective for their next pay, correct?
I don't know about that.
Or the next.
Yeah.
The one after.
It's just a lot of
Right.
crunching numbers, because you have to then say, okay, well, how many days have already passed and stuff like that. It's about 40 or 50 employees you would have.
Sure.
So I would want to give my staff time to do it right.
So let's see, that would be the 2nd October.
At the latest, the end of October. Hopefully, we can do it the October 15th, whatever day that is.
Well, you knew it was coming, so I'm quite sure you probably have some. Mr. Hatter, do you have anything else? Mr. Dempster? Ms. Sarah?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Avery? Okay. We need a motion to approve.
I move to approve the nutrition service salary schedule proposal.
I second.
Okay, Becky?
Ms. Starlich? Yes. Mr. Gashtry?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Hager?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
No. And I'd like to explain my note. I know that it is coming out of a separate pot, but until we look at everybody in the whole, then I think we just stay status quo. Thank you.
I know you have your next item there, Mr. Fiscal.
Yes, sir. So the next item is a request to move pay for just this school year. So it would revert back to the 135, our normal pay next year, just for this school year, to $200 for substitute teachers for a daily rate. Reason being, we have a great need for subs. Mr. Alter actually pulled some data, should you want specifics on it, but the vast majority of our subs are going unbilled in our buildings every day. We have many teachers quarantined throughout the district, and creates a supervision issue and a safety issue. So we tried to come up with a number as a cabinet that would move the needle, if you will, and actually hopefully get some subs in our buildings this year and get people to brave COVID and come in and work for our kids. So I'm asking the board to entertain that as well.
Is other districts having trouble with subs as well, do you know?
Very much so. I'm specifically talking, and they are as well, not quite as bad, but they too are really struggling.
Mr. Hacker, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I guess, I know it's just for this year, but I guess it's just another arms race issue where we're raising ours to 200 now. Kent County's gonna raise theirs to 210 or something like that. I guess my other question would be when we pull our current classified staff member to sub in a classroom because we can't get any subs, then do we adjust their daily rate to be this daily sub rate, or do they just stay at their normal daily rate, but they're taking on the responsibilities of being a sub?
So there are still certain qualifications to be a sub that person may not meet. It's also, they have the guarantee of a job, they have benefits, and some other things in this question. Right now, this would not change their daily rate. In theory, they could resign and apply for some, if they met the qualifications, they move to that rate, but it would not automatically take that.
And I completely understand that. I think in this era of begging for subs and not being able to find them, and then, the extra work is going to fall back on, our classified staff, and someone has to supervise these kids. They just can't be unsupervised. I would hope that's something we could at least look at. Is that something that we could do to help those classified staff members when they have to take on this additional responsibility?
We've been discussing that. As a matter of fact, I've got Coach Winkler. She's going to be joining me Monday, and her and I and Director Birchie and Mr. Bryan are going to sit down and brainstorm. We've talked about this pretty thoroughly as a cabinet, and we just hadn't been able to overcome some of the obstacles that may not exist like when we use a certified person. They're out, classified or hourly paid people, and I guess they're, in their contract, it says you get, I just know one that I know probably off the top of my head. They're all at different places, but one might be their contract is I work 7 hours a day. I get a 30-minute duty-free lunch, and I might get 2 10-minute or 2 15-minute breaks. I don't know if it's 10 or 15 minutes. I just know it's one of the two. So the challenge is, if that's what they're to do, whatever they're assigned to do at that time. So the challenge is, okay, if we do have them do something different, their contract still says they get 7 hours, 30-minute duty-free lunch, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, 2 of those breaks. And so if we wanted to try to compensate them a little differently, you can't pay them twice. You can't pay them double for, their contract says I get 7 hours, I get a 30-minute break, lunch break, 2 10 minutes. So we can't pay them twice, so that's been our challenge. So if they were to, again, it's hard to explain. I just know we can't pay them twice for the work.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying, if my daily rate as an IA is $100, but the sub rate is $200, are you able to supplement my pay that day $100 to match what the sub pay is? I'm also curious if any of the Senate Bill 1 implications come in here where classified staff members can now cover classroom. I didn't know if that would help, since we're only considering this for 1 year.
So, Mary Ann, can I ask you, maybe you might help us on this? Probably need to schedule you in with us, but I know we're dealing with the labor laws when we're dealing with hourly employees. The other piece we have is the overtime. If they work over 5 hours, some employees, whatever, maybe 35 hours a week. So if they get 240, we automatically have to pay them time ahead. So again, the challenge is how do we, what we had talked about previously is if they did something like that and then they worked some hours over, then maybe, I don't know, we struggle with that. We struggle with it.
Comp time. It would be eligible for comp time, but, I think if they are, I was wondering if the place to do.
Right.
This isn't unique to school districts. That is happening with cities too, with trying to hire police and fire, giving these same questions. Because new hires are coming in with incentives, and then they're competing with their existing groups. And I'm trying to provide them here too. But if you're gonna have classified employees, you generally, I would say, they're going to be taking on additional duties, we have to be able to pay them some way. You can't pay them the rate, you can't pay them for the same hour twice.
Right.
But there can.
They do that in a way to move the daily rate to the monthly, if they're not at that, to say
Right, if they're in the,
that's actually an idea.
I guess it gives me confidence that Mr. Harris, we're gonna get these smart people in a room and you guys can, I'm sure, figure out how to do some hard things.
We're gonna try. Sure. We're gonna try because again, right now what we encourage the principals to do, we're asking them to try to stay away from asking classified to cover a class all day. I'm sure it's still going on, but that's been our message that we're trying to avoid classified supervisors doing all day. Prior to the legislation, we weren't supposed to do that anyway, prior to Senate Bill 1. So we are asking folks to try to stay away from that until we figure out how to compensate if they're going to cover all day.
I know we've been talking about this for years.
Yes.
Trying to come up with some kind of plan. And I understand that they're district employees, they're not school employees, they're district employees. So whatever their duty is that day, it's whatever is needed, really. But if they've got the extra responsibility, they need to be paid for the extra. And I'm quite sure you guys will figure it out.
We're trying.
So, but for tonight, what do you're wanting us to approve the substitute teachers' pay, and we can always come back and change this if you guys come up with a plan, or would it still be this?
If you approve this, it'll probably be locked into the end of the school year. The other option we were thinking about was requesting for each school a couple of full-time subs. And doing the math, we thought this might be a cheaper way of reaching the goal, but to Mr. Harris' point, it could become an arms race. I mean, it really could. We're trying to get a monopoly on the field out there. We're trying to get a monopoly on it until other districts catch up. We hope that it might take them a few months to realize that we bumped the sub pay. We're trying to get a monopoly on the sub pool. That's the word I'm looking for. In the region, that's our goal with this. But to his point, King County can come back and raise it 210, Boone County can come back and raise it 220. It is an arms race. We're hoping they're gonna do that. But if not, our other plan was to, come on up, Mr. Rock, you can talk about the other plan we were trying to do to deal with this situation.
So this is the sub increase. I mean, that's one of multiple plans we're trying to come up with. Because it would be awesome if we got 50 more subs, but we don't even know if that'll work. So this is one of the multiple plans that we were trying to work on. In schools right now, for example, at the high school, they have a rotation involved where they have administrators, counselors, whoever in their building that's not in the classroom, rotating, covering classrooms all day. There have been some days when they've covered all day. They've also, now they have some teachers who have said they would do the same. So they've got a plan in place where they rotate at their planning times. So with that rotation plan in place, and also with being able to up the sub pay, and we have not brought this to the table, but we're also looking at, can we look at getting permanent subs in buildings just for this year? So they're on ground all day. 2 for each elementary school, 3 for the high school, middle school, and so forth. So what I'm trying to say is, we have had to, one plan's not gonna work. We got to have multiple plans to cover and keep our schools open with the number of staff that we have. So just to share with you, so far this year, Becky put on some reports for me. The 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th, just to give you an example. And these aren't just all COVID absences. These are sick days. These are everything that you would need coverage for. These are cafeteria workers, IAs. We had on the 13th, 70 absences, 10 subs signed up.
District-wide, right?
District-wide. On the 14th, 60, 13 subs. On the 15th, 60 absences, 13 subs. On the 16th, 57 and 12 subs. So overall, we've had 247 absences on, and a lot of them have been COVID, but 247, we've covered 20%, 19% with subs. So schools have been left to cover 80% of the open classrooms, some way, somehow. So that, to me, that's, we have to take our hats off to principals and everybody for keeping those classrooms covered, and however they're doing it. I want to also mention one more thing. Out of those 48 subs, 25 of those subs are subs they have in buildings that are somehow, some way with those schools funded, that they come every single day. And that's what I was trying to say. So 48 minus 25, that's the number of subs that get called that come in, so the number's even lower of the number of subs that are coming from the call list. That's the reason for the up in the pay, yes.
And we also looked at another district. This is happening all across the state. Owensboro, they are giving substitutes a bump on Mondays and Fridays, because that's where, like us, they see the biggest need is on Mondays and Fridays, when people take them longer weekends and things like that. So they're also giving a bump if you if you go out and recruit a sub to the district. Are they also giving that bump? I can't remember that.
For employees, if you recruit a sub, you get a certain amount of money. If they stay for 30, 90 days, you get another certain amount of money. That was the bonus. So those are just some numbers we wanted you to see of the, well, that plan. But we're trying to work on multiple plans, and the one tonight's just one.
But if you're working on other plans, what does this do then? I mean, we're gonna have to come in and change it.
If this works, we may not have to bring another plan. If this doesn't work, we might have to back up and try one of the other ideas. That's the thing. If this works, we're good. If it doesn't, we got to think about a different way to reach the same goal. That's our people in the building, supervisors are here.
Okay, Mr. Packard, do you have any information? You guys know. Mr. Not. Mr. Avery.
When we have 50 people absent, what percentage of that, the overall staff? If it's 60 people absent.
No, it's gonna vary depending on building, you know, we don't,
It's going, this is why, what would that impact?
I haven't ran
Well,
the.
Mr. Bryan ran some numbers recently about how many staff members we have. What was your total there, Mr. Bryan?
Just getting your number. I can tell. A lot of calculators.
Right.
It's about 7% of the total staff. 50 is
70?
700 students, or we got about 700 staff members, counting cafeteria, district employees, and.
But that was just teachers out, right?
No, that
Oh,
was
that's
everybody.
employees. Okay, gotcha.
That was everybody, but the majority of absences are teachers, instructional assistants. About 7% is.
Has any of these employees ever been considered to be chronic, absent a lot? Some more than others?
We've been looking for that too, chronic. Yes, we have been looking for that. Having discussions with principals, especially in our most extreme cases. I know we had a discussion with the hospital to make sure they're making sure it's not a chronic absenteeism situation. And it's really been, the high school's been probably the most challenging. Of course, it's our largest school, followed looking at Coach Winkler. I think, has it been a big issue at middle school as well?
I mean, I don't think it's chronic, I think it's, I have to.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I've been in a classroom the last 2 days because, when you all talk about the leave, he had to take off because his in-laws have COVID and now they don't have a babysitter. So we're getting some of that, and I don't think it's chronic, I just think there's so many at one time.
Right.
It's not the chronic, it's the number in one day. Like, if there's 8 teachers out, we only have 3 subs.
Right.
That leaves 5 classrooms that myself and other classified plus APs and instructional coaches and anybody who's able to move, we're bouncing in and out. I could be in a different classroom for 3 different periods in a day, subbing. So I don't think it's chronic, I think it's the number out each day.
But I think Mr. Avery's point is are we looking at folks that are chronically absent during this time and addressing those folks that are chronically absent? Did I sum up your question? Right, yeah, that's what he was talking about.
Right,
And
I don't think in our
it's that.
building, it's
Right.
not that, it's the number in one day's time. When you walk in, there's 10 staff out, you've got 3 subs, that's now 7 classrooms that has no one in there.
I'm still new to the position. I've only been doing this a brief time, but my experience is that the vast majority of our folks are doing the right thing and coming and trying to be at work every day. If a principal does have one that they say, hey, let's look at this, we can run reports off of ASOP, our absence management system, and it'll even tell us, how many Fridays, what percentage of their days are Friday, and it's a pretty powerful tool for us that pretty quickly can do that. And I'm just thinking district-wide, I think I've had one case where our principal's like, hey, let's look at this. And we did talk to that person, but it isn't an overwhelming issue that I'm aware of yet.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I move to approve the substitute teacher pay increase.
A second.
Jackie?
Ms. Lurlich? Yes. Mr. Gastrite?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. I think our schools will be so appreciative. Get some support there. Last thing, it looks like it's my item, and it's just the vaccine incentive participation. And of course, we're requesting that the board first give us the approval to participate in the vaccine incentive plan by KC, which is $100 each employee. And we also would like to ask the board to match that $100 as an additional incentive for employees getting vaccinated. So that's $200. And it's my understanding that money wouldn't be taxed, so it wouldn't necessarily be a great sum of $200. It'd be probably, depending on the employee. I don't think it'll go into your retirement, but it will be taxed. Am I correct with that, Director Burgess?
Yeah, we had a KDE webinar today because we finance people get in the weeds to be able to make sure we do what we have to for taxes and stuff. So it would be taxable, but you don't have to go into retirement or classified or certified. But KDE will only reimburse you 100. So we as employers have taxes we have to pay the federal government too. So that $100 that KDE is matching, we would have to pay for. When I say we, the district would have to pay for that difference, as well as if you match it, we'll be paying the 100 plus all those taxes too. It is an allowable expense out of ESSER, so we can do that. And so we're still ironing out some weeds of making sure we do this right with the federal government and IRS. And we had some conversations today.
And I want to read this especially for the folks that are just listening in. Under the vaccine incentive plan, all full and part-time employees of public school districts are eligible for a one-time vaccination incentive payment of $100 after being fully vaccinated against COVID-19. This reimbursement is for employees who previously have been vaccinated, as well as those who have received their full vaccinations by December the 1st, 2020.
Right, so what KDE is asking is that, yes, you compile and get that information, so we already have that avenue with Ms. Foley of collecting the vaccines, but we have to have proof that we have to have proof of their card, and we have to keep it for auditing purposes, is what KDE is telling us. And so we will need to have that on file, and so Jen could actually keep all that, and just give me, as finance director, who I need to pay. And so there's a tracking mechanism for that, but they have to get their shot by December 1st if they want to be eligible to be able to get this 100 or 100 plus you as a match for that to do that.
And how are you going to let the employees know about this?
Well, we would once, well, I would think we would want to send out something to all the employees, and each building person is probably going to talk to the employees.
As a matter of fact, we already sent out one, I think I sent it to you guys as well, where I was saying, here's what's going on basically, and we're going to ask the board to consider that when we receive the information. I think you may not necessarily go to everybody, but the same way where I came to you individually, but you got that.
We were trying to give employees a heads up, and so we had said we'll give them more details as we get more details, and so we'll keep them educated about that. So again, that is another thing that we have to do through payroll. So again, we have 700 employees, so it has to go through payroll to actually take care of that and process all that. So that's a process we have to set up and get that rolling.
Okay, I'm going to go around the table. See if I got any questions.
I mean, I assume obviously KDE's part comes from there. Our part will come out of ESSER as well. I assume our $100, if we match it, will come out of ESSER. Our ESSER dollars?
Yeah, it's an allowable expense, so that's what we would recommend is ESSER. But as Mr. Garrison just mentioned a little bit ago, we're to the point of where we're going to be talking about ESSER $3. And so there's some things that are happening that we're saying, okay, if we want to do we have to go ahead and start using ESSER, but then we have to put it in the plan and then bring it back to you as a board with some of those things before we said yes to.
Well, I got, I'm all for incentivizing and giving vaccine. I think I'm going to go out on an assumption and think that the majority of our employees have already been vaccinated. But to Mary, your point earlier, with the president's actions and going through OSHA, this is going to be required anyway, right?
Did you guys review anything?
new additional questions?
Is there?
Nope, I just answered my own question.
Okay, and can I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the vaccine incentive participation and match request.
I second.
Becky? Ms. Larlage?
Yes.
Mr. Castro?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff? Yes.
And finally, we do have an addendum item.
I guess we do.
And it is the school operations plan, and I tried to keep you all abreast of some of the news coming out of Frankfurt, and part of the requirement of Senate Bill 1 is that we revise our reopening plan, and we changed the name to the language they use, school operations plan, to keep kids in school, and that's the goal of this plan, is to keep kids in school. And some of the changes in the plan that you may not have seen before, we did add like a mask so that folks can see, a mask matrix so that folks can have some hope, our kids and families can have some hope that maybe one day we may not be required to wear masks. So that was included in this new plan. We had language around NTI days and remote learning days in the new plan because we thought it was important for folks to know that we still only have the 10 NTI days when we close the district, 10 days, and let folks go to remote learning for 10 days only district-wide. The other remote learning days are basically if there's a school or class or something like that, we have up to 20 days that we can just shut down maybe one school or one classroom or a couple of buildings, but you cannot use the 20 days of remote learning days for an entire district. That would be against that rule. Trying to see if there's any other highlights. We did include we have to revise the sick leave pay depending on what we find out, but we did have, based on what we talked about tonight, the sick leave pay in there, in which if we're able to give our employees full pay, vaccinated employees, then we have to go in there and revise this. But this basically was what we talked about, Mr. Kickerbock talked about, the first version early on. And I think, unless you have any questions, I think that covers the changes from the reopening plan to the operations plan. I'll address any questions you may have. Oh, and it did include tests per se that we're exploring that we'll continue to explore that and try to figure that out. So if no questions, though, we'd love to have your approval with this plan because we have to submit it. We've submitted our previous version of this plan already, but we want to submit a copy, a more current copy, so that KE knows what we're doing around these issues. Instead of building.
Mr. Haggard indicated he didn't have any questions. Mr. Gattari? Ms. Larlage? Okay, can I have approval, please?
I move to approve the COVID-19 school operations plan.
I second.
Becky?
Ms. Larlage? Yes.
Mr. Gattari?
Yes.
Mr. Avery?
Yes.
Mr. Haggard?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff? Yes. Before the attorney.
Yes.
I did not have a report tonight.
Further
You've heard enough from me.
Further discussion and announcements. I have two. The rumor is that St. Elizabeth, and you may know something about this, since you have meetings with the mayor. The St. Elizabeth Hospital, the communities are trying to figure out what to do with it and how to make them community friendly. So like a little park or what to do inside the buildings besides just being an office space. I hear that I don't know the committee members, but I have heard that there is a committee and they're just getting ideas of what to work with it. Linda gave her idea, and I would like for you to pass it on to the mayor if you happen to have a meeting with him, is this is where we could possibly put in our competition swimming pool. That way, not only we use it, but other school districts could use it as well. Families could use it when there's not a competition or a practice going on. So, I don't even know who to contact at the city. I just know that people are talking about it. So I just wanted to plant the seed, come up with some ideas. Also, some of the parents at Wallace Woods would like for us to update the Mike and Field playground. Because we have now over 20 youngsters, 3 and below, that have no place to play. And our playground equipment down there is outdated, it needs to be updated, and one family has asked for a handicap swing to be added. So that's something that I'm planting the seed that we can talk about.
All right, we'll start, we will start investigating that, exploring that. I guess, was that playground, I know Mike and Field belongs to us, but was that playground belong to us as well?
Okay. Anybody else have anything for further discussion? Yes, Mr.
You jogged my memory. I know Covington Parks has an event at Westonburg Park, which is at 15th and Eastern, I believe. It's right up against the flood wall there. They're soliciting ideas for what they do with the park. And one of the ideas is a multi-use field that can be used for soccer. So I have talked to Brian Walls because we know soccer facilities among our schools are very scarce. Most of our schools go to 9th district, I think, to play. Most schools don't have a place to practice. So I think this could be, so I just encourage our community, if anyone's out there, or people in this room, to take the survey, the city has a survey out about the park. And Mr. Walls and myself are going to meet with the director of the parks to just talk about how to co-use. There's things that we can do. We don't know where that discussion goes, and it might be a future request, but the idea that could be used for 6 districts to have a place to practice soccer.
Anybody else got anything that they would want to share? Okay. We need to set a retreat date. The one thing on the agenda will be the, Stacy sent us an email, and the, what's it called? What did I tell you? It was called? Yes. They wanted to revisit our mission statement and, talk about it, about what we feel that it means, and what our core beliefs are, our mission, and our core beliefs. That's where ours is here. So we need to check our calendars. Becky's going to send out a reminder email. I'm thinking maybe a Saturday 9 to 12, not an all-day thing, maybe 3 items that needs to be discussed by us. Okay. Red folders. And this is just Jennifer's Fowley's information that she sent us on the email about the COVID, that's what's in there. Okay, does anybody have anything else? We've got upcoming events.
I was gonna say homecoming tomorrow, homecoming parade and homecoming seems to be an exciting event. I think we're gonna be able to get some steps in if you choose to be there.
It's all walking,
It's
right?
all walking, so just put that in your mind, that if you're, if you're not up to it, or you're not wanting to do it, that it's all walking. I don't know the temperature, but I do know that, I think I've been told it's supposed to be a nice night. So we'll see.
Okay. So you've got that, the winter symposium for KSBA is coming December the 3rd and 4th. If you plan to attend that, let Becky know as soon as you decide, so she can put you on the list to make arrangements. Next board meeting is, when is the next board meeting?
It's on Wednesday.
October the 6th?
Instead of a Thursday.
Yes, it's Wednesday. Okay.
Oh, crazy. Mixing it up.
All right, we need to go into executive session.
Yes, I think you want to stand in executive session, so We'll need a motion to go into executive session pursuant to KRS 61.810(1)(f) to discuss appointment of personnel.
I need to go into executive session.
I second.
Consensus? Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes,
I move to adjourn.
I second.
Consensus?
Yep.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.